putting the best possible spin here on it, was that, you know what, prayer is natural. It's just natural. You got to find your own way. Whatever works best for you, it's going to come naturally to you. And in my experience, that's just not the case at all. At all. Prayer is hard. The spiritual life is challenging. It is difficult. You can't simply assume that without any effort at all, it's going to develop or even be present. It requires a determination. It requires habits. It requires the support of Christian friendship. So let's just get that out there right away, and we need to come to accept that. Prayer is not easy. Prayer is not easy. And it's not easy for a number of different reasons. The most fundamental reason is because we are sons and daughters of Adam. We are fallen. So our intellect is darkened, our will is weakened, we are lazy, we are proud, we find it difficult to obey the Lord and His commandment to speak to Him and to be with Him. We have got our own agendas, we're busy, we're distracted in 1,000 different ways. We can be overcome with presumption, believing that in the end everything's going to work out, no need to really give an effort in this area. Or we can be overcome with despair. I'm so broken, I'm so sinful, why would God want to listen to me? In all of these areas, we confront the real challenge of the spiritual life. In the garden, as the Lord is preparing for His death, what's the response of His closest friends, of Peter, of James, and John? They fall asleep. The dudes fall asleep. And that's a symbol not only of the weakness of the flesh, but the weakness of the soul. The Lord calls us to walk with Him and to be with Him, but so often we are distracted, we are overcome by the burdens of our life and by the struggles within and without, by our own, laziness. We have to pray for the grace to be awake and to enter into the battle of the spiritual life, because it is a battle. The great spiritual writers speak about prayer as a battle, as a combat. Scripture, St. Paul, speaks about the life of prayer as a battle. Who are the enemies in this battle? We've talked about some of the temptations, but who are the real concrete enemies that we must do battle with in the spiritual life? Well, traditionally there are three put forward by the church's theologians and spiritual writers. And these three enemies are on the prowl right now. You encounter them every day. They are the flesh, the world, and the devil. The flesh, the world, and the devil. Keep those in mind as you endure temptations to give up prayer, to substitute action for prayer, to think that there's no real practical need for prayer. It's a nice exercise like stretching, but do you really need it? No. Do not believe that temptation, which comes from any one of these three enemies. The flesh. Again, we are weak. All of us are weak in one way or another, and most of us are weak in multiple ways. The flesh would have us believe that, again, prayer is not worth the effort. Even if we know it intellectually, our flesh chides against being told what to do. We do not want to conform our life to the mystery of daily struggle. Who wants to accept the fact that my life's going to be a daily struggle for the rest of my life? We don't like that. The flesh certainly doesn't like that. Sometimes if we hear this phrase, the flesh, as one of the enemies, we can think of primarily as struggles with impurity. And indeed, that's a real struggle. That is a real struggle. Struggles with impurity are very, very important. Notice what I said there, struggles with impurity, struggles with impurity. They're very, very important. Number one, because for many individuals, they're one of the predominant temptations that can be faced. But number two, many of the disciplines that can be exercised to overcome impurity, or at the very least to resist the temptation, can be applied in multiple fronts in this life of the spiritual battle. The willingness to separate ourselves from occasions of sin. For example, if we struggle with impurity, it's probably a bad idea to be looking at the internet after 10 o'clock at night, alone in the privacy of our room. If we're struggling with impurity, we have to realize too that the lack of balance in our life, the lack of sleep, the lack of exercise, the lack of self-control in other areas of our life are bound to affect us in our battle with impurity. It teaches us that in the spiritual life, one area of surrender, just going to give myself over to overeating. I'm just going to give myself over to laziness. I'm going to give myself over to this fault or that fault. It will bleed over into other areas, including the struggles with impurity. Without getting into too much detail, the connection between struggle with impurity and blindness is not just an old wives' tale. It's a spiritual truth. It's a spiritual truth that impurity can in fact blind us to the goodness of the world, the goodness of one another. We no longer see the dignity in other human beings. And so again, impurity teaches us that to give ourselves over or to surrender to a particular fault or vice results in damage to relationships. There is no such thing as a private sin. It affects others in a profound way, even if we don't necessarily see it or refuse to see it. The flesh. Brothers and sisters, your human nature is affected by sin. And because of that, we have to be constantly fighting against ourselves. And things like penances, small denials of self really do matter and really are important. And we have to be willing to embrace that, even during the great season of Easter, the great season of celebration, because the flesh, like a spoiled child, wants what it wants, and it wants it now. And we have to be willing to say no to ourselves and to engage in that kind of self-discipline that is so necessary for the growth in spiritual holiness. The world, another enemy in the spiritual life is the world. One of the real struggles, again, I've mentioned it before in this very talk, that the world lulls us into or confronts us with is distraction. We live in a world of frenetic pace, constant pace. And as we've suggested before, I would encourage you to kind of get a sense as to how far we have gone. Turn down your TV. Turn off your TV. Turn down the volume on channel 0, as some have said. Turn it all the way down and look at the number of images that are going to be flashed at you. The number of images in a short period of time. It's easy to not notice that when the soundtrack is telling you exactly how to feel or what to think. But turn the music all the way down and you will see hundreds of images flash before your eyes in a matter of minutes. A matter of minutes. That's the pace of the world, constantly moving. We got to have short little clips, short little things to grab people. Many teachers have noted to me the decrease in attention spans, even among students who don't necessarily have diagnosable behavioral challenges. There's an incredible decrease in the capacity to just be attentive. This is one of the, I think, scary realities that we all have to face, is that we are, and I would just encourage you in your own homes to be attentive to this. Are we raising a generation of people who are not able to be attentive to the struggles and the depth of discussions we need to have now? Constantly on the move, not willing to just sit and to be quiet and to engage in just looking at things and thinking about important topics. Another real struggle that we have in the world, of course, is again the temptation of activism. There's always got to be some action involved. Always has to be some movement or some great cause that we can rally around. And there's many different causes that we should be committed to. All kinds of different struggles that our world is engaged in. Struggles for social justice. Very real, very good when properly understood. But we can be tempted to think that action is more important than prayer. And that the prayer stuff, we can do that later. What matters now is justice. Justice. We must be about the business of justice now. Prayer can wait. And that's exactly the opposite. We have to build our lives of action on prayer. And so the temptation and the lie of the world that what matters is politics. What matters is action. What matters is slogans and marching in the street. all of which can be good. But if it's not rooted in prayer, it's a house built upon sand. Our primary duty of justice is to God. Other lies that are told us by the world, certainly the lies of separation based upon ethnicity, based upon race. Racism is a lie. It's a lie of the enemy. I think Paul Simon called it the myth of fingerprints, that we're somehow different. We're somehow fundamentally different. And we have different personalities, different insights. But at the core, we're all human beings made in the image and likeness of God. And any temptation that comes from the world and from its commentators that would separate us into nice, clear-cut camps needs to be rejected. We are brothers and sisters in the Lord, and in our desire for happiness, in the desire to provide for our family and the best for them. The lie of the world of materialism, that your fundamental value and meaning is based upon how much you make, the kind of comforts that you have, the luxury that you have and can provide for your family. That's a lie. It's a lie of the world, and we need to reject it. As parents, you have one of your primary duties is to be a gatekeeper. It's to be a gatekeeper against the lies of the world. Now, you can't just keep your kid sheltered in a box, okay? You can't do that either. But you have an obligation to be on guard in the ways in which the lies of the world begin to seep into your home. One of the primary ways is by striving to reject those lies yourself and to be attentive to them and to speak to your kids about them and to notice and to admit when you yourself have begun to succumb to them, the ways in which you yourself have begun to accept them. A very prominent local preacher a number of years ago suggested that the congregation literally throw the TV outside of the window and smash it, literally. Now, at the time, as a young 14-year-old punk rocker, I thought, this guy's crazy. But the older I have got, the more I thought, he might actually have been onto something. Now, to be clear with you, I still got a couple of TVs in the rectory, okay? So don't be, have a little caveat there. But that's one of the primary ways in which these lies seep into our homes. Certainly the cell phone's probably even a greater culprit in this area. What are the ways in which the world has marched right into my life, into my family, into my living room, and proclaimed lies, and my kids are buying it? You are with your kid the most, and then right after you is media, right after. So whatever narrative you've got a competition. You've got a competition. And strive to do battle with that competition. Finally, I promise you, the devil who is a very real creature made as an angelic being with a literal superhuman intellect, who wants us to be in separation from God. The devil's very real, and he too comes as a lion looking for souls to devour. And he comes with lies of despair. He comes with lies of presumption. Everything's okay. There's no need for me to change. Father's talking about somebody else, not about me. The devil who comes as the accuser, who reminds us of all of our faults and failures. You're a terrible parent. Just get by. Get by. You're not cut up for this excellent stuff. Throw the TV out the window. That guy's a lunatic. He's a lunatic. The devil can whisper in our ears 1,000 different lies. And the biggest lie, of course, is that we don't need Jesus. We don't need the Messiah. The Messiah is another religious figure, an option among many. But you know what? I got the gym. What do I need Jesus for? I got the gym. He can substitute all kinds of different figures and philosophies and ways of life for the Messiah and a personal relationship with the Lord. And nothing can take that place. The devil's very real. And there's a reason why we pray the St. Michael prayer after every Mass at Transfiguration. Because we acknowledge spiritual realities. So, all three of these enemies want to make us stumble in our life of prayer, in our life and our walk with the Lord. One So having acknowledged these enemies, I want to talk about one particular temptation that all three of these enemies, the flesh, the world, and the devil, can play upon. Remember that temptation can come from 1,000 different places. It doesn't just come from the devil. It doesn't just come from the enemy. Sometimes we can sort of speak, the devil made me do it. Really? Maybe you're just the problem. Maybe you're the problem. Not the problem is the devil. You're the problem. So temptations will come from 1,000 different places. What matters is how we deal with them and how we overcome them. One temptation in the spiritual life, one situation, perhaps better put, is dryness. Dryness in the spiritual life, a lack of consolation. Consolation, of course, just means to feel good. We feel good. We experience something of the joy of being in relationship with God or with one another. But there's many times if someone is seeking to develop in the spiritual life where we will not feel warm fuzzies. Many times, where rather what we will experience is called by the spiritual writers dryness. Dryness. And this, of course, is a reference to the desert. The desert. The desert which is dry. The desert which is hot. The desert which is very cold at night. Dryness, spiritual dryness. And as we are striving to walk with the Lord, there will be moments where, this doesn't feel real fun anymore. This just isn't fun. Prayer isn't fun anymore. Why am I not feeling this deep experience of joy and peace? Well, because that's how real relationships work. I've got to think that for most of you who are married, there are moments in your married life where days simply must be chosen to walk through with joy and with love. Because it doesn't always happen naturally. The beginning of one's relationship, I would imagine, all kinds of warm fuzzies, all kinds of an experience of joy and delight, those butterflies which are so awkwardly wonderful. And that too can be present in our own walk with the Lord, perhaps some great spiritual experience, a wonderful time of adoration, please God, a beautiful mass, some spiritual conversation with a friend or a family member, an experience with suffering that we overcome. We get to these moments of spiritual highs where we really feel the Lord, we feel Him. And then, over time, it passes on. And as we walk day to day, that experience becomes more and more remote, emotionally. And all that is left is simply the knowledge God is with me, and I must choose this. I want to repeat, this phenomenon is true in virtually every single other area of our life. Virtually every single area of our life. Whether it is an academic pursuit, whether it is a sports pursuit, my goodness gracious, talk to any major successful sports figure, and I would guess that they will tell you that 99.5% of why I am good is because, at what I do, because Monday through Saturday, I practice. I'm talking about practice. We practice and we exercise and we put our body through extreme measures so that when game day comes, we are ready. I got to imagine that most of those practices, most of the time getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the morning and working on your weights or your cardio or carbos or whatever, maybe you eat carbos, whatever. That's not terribly fun, okay? That's not going to be super fun. One of my subscriptions is to Jocko. Some of you may know Jocko. He's a motivational speaker guy, former Navy SEAL guy, and he sends out these texts at 5:30 in the morning with an image of his rig that he does his exercises on. It's like dripping in sweat. There's like blood, and he says, round one, fight. This struggle to get up and to endure the day and to work through it. It's found in every other area of excellence. But the greatest image is, to use, I think, and the most effective, is a relationship, a marriage, a good friendship. It requires effort. It requires work. And sometimes, even if you don't want to, dare I say it, at that particular moment, I don't want to be with my husband right now, okay? I don't want to be with, perhaps even right now, I'm tired, I'm worn out. I don't want to be with my kids right now. I don't want to leave them, but I don't want to be with them right now. We must choose it. We choose it. That same phenomenon happens with our walk with the Lord. Spiritual dryness is very real because our relationship with God is very real. Someone, a dear young woman who recently asked me, Father, how can we know if we no longer have faith? How can we know if we no longer have faith? What's the difference between struggles with dogmatic proclamations and church discipline? What's the difference between that and the loss of faith? It's a very good question, and the answer that I proposed to her, and I leave you to determine if it was good or not, was that one of the signs is that we abandon the relationship with God. That there can be all kinds of struggles with church teaching or dogmatic expressions, but if we're still talking with Him, and even better, if we're still engaged in the sacraments of the church, there is something of faith there. Why do I say that? Because faith is a relationship. Yes, it's a virtue, but it's manifested in a relationship. And if we're not engaged in a relationship with God, conversation, the sacraments, it's really become an intellectual experiment. It's become an intellectual endeavor. We're thinking about God as an idea, no longer as a person, and that's what Christian faith is. Belief in God as a person who has made a personal choice to love me that demands a response, the response of love, however obscure and awkward that might be. So, our life of prayer also must be rooted in this relationship. It's a manifestation of a relationship. And like every other relationship, it requires daily effort, daily choice. Some of you are aware that the great writers, especially within the Carmelite spirituality, have spoken about the dark night of the soul, this phenomenon whereby the souls who are going through intense purification experience nothing of God's presence. They feel nothing of God's presence, not the joy, not the peace of the Lord. They experience nothing, and there's a darkness there as they are purified. Now, my brothers and sisters, as we've said before, most Christians this side of the veil, I would offer, probably are not advanced enough to get to the dark night of the soul. What you need instead is a good nap, okay? Or a good dinner. Difficulties with depression, difficulties with interpersonal relationships, professional disappointments, these are not the dark night of the soul. This is something else. This is a spiritual stage that the soul goes through, whether it's in this life or, I would like to think, in purgatory. And at the heart of the spiritual, at the dark night of the soul, is experience of our humanity, our creatureliness. I cannot save myself. I am incapable of saving myself. I must wait for the Lord's action. I must wait for the Lord. Teresa of Lisieux uses a beautiful image like a ball that's off in the corner waiting to be picked up by a child. That's like me. I must wait for the Lord. Now, He is a loving God. He will pick us up. He is with us. But we must pray for the grace to come to understand this. And this is why failure and brokenness can be such a good thing that the Lord can use, because it reminds us of our need for Him, which the dark night of the soul, I would say, is a profound and necessary manifestation of. So spiritual dryness, it's going to get hard. There'll be days where your time for prayer comes up. Oh, come on, Sunday football's on. Come on, do I really got to pray now? It's difficult, it's hard. Yes, we must work through it. We have to accept the fact that prayer is hard, and spiritual dryness is simply part of the spiritual life. And for some it lasts for weeks, for months, for years. It's nothing to be afraid of, as hard as it is. It's part of the dynamics of our walk with the Lord. What is important is we choose day after day to be with Him and to spend time with Him, as distracted as we are. Many of you are aware that Teresa of Avila wrote in her spiritual diary. Teresa of Avila, one of the greatest spiritual writers of them all. She wrote for years in her spiritual diary, nada, 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 nothing, nothing, nothing. She would spend her time in prayer, and she would have to literally hold herself into the pew, onto the pew, white knuckle it, literally. And at the end of her spiritual time of prayer, nothing. I got nothing. No great insights, no great consolations, nada, nothing. But she showed up day after day. She showed up. What are some of the tactics that can be embraced to overcome, or rather to endure, spiritual dryness and to stand fast against the tactics of the flesh and the world and the devil? Doesn't look like we're going to get to the communion of the saints here today, but this is important stuff. So, number one, again I say, daily routine, daily commitment to prayer. Every single Christian should have some time set aside every day for prayer. Now, it's going to have to be different based upon your state of life. The length of time, the time of day, it will have to be particular for you. There's no single answer to what is the best time to pray. But there needs to be time every day where we speak to the Lord in some way, shape, or form. Through spiritual reading, through private petitions, through the rosary, prayed well and meditatively. There has to be time set aside every day for prayer. And when that time comes, when our phone rings and reminds us, time for prayer, we need to engage it. Whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour for those who can, we need to be faithful to that. And if we fail one day, get back on the horse and go the next day. And don't, by the way, try to compound it, Well, I missed my 20 minutes yesterday, I'm going to pray for 40 minutes today. I would encourage you not to embrace that, because eventually it's going to build up and get so overwhelming, you'll simply abandon the practice altogether. You failed today, tomorrow you will succeed. Begin again. Be faithful to your daily routine of prayer, and it's going to be hard. A couple of days, it'll be easy, and then very quickly it's going to get difficult, and you're going to think 1,000 different things that you should be doing instead. Be faithful to your daily prayer. And if you don't have that time, think to yourself today, when will my time for prayer be? When can I best give to the Lord my best? A second tool for fidelity in the spiritual life, especially in the midst of dryness, is Christian friendship. We need fellow Christians to walk with and to inspire us and to challenge us. If you don't have friends in your life who are striving to live the faith well, you need to get some. You need to get some. And it's not enough, by the way, just to greet them out in the gathering space for donuts. You should be actively developing Christian friendships with fellow Christians who are striving, however awkwardly, to live the faith well. Now, that can look all sorts of different ways, what that will mean, how you will develop that friendship. But it needs to happen. We have a number of small groups here at Transfiguration, a beautiful way, a very practical way to develop relationships with fellow Christians who are working at it, who are striving to live the faith. Without that support system, we'll fail. The human life, let alone the Christian life, is not meant to be lived in solitude. It's not meant to be lived in isolation. It's meant to be lived with one another. And if all of your friends are friends who have no connection to Christianity whatsoever, if they're not striving to live the faith well, then you need to find different friends. Easier said than done, I know it full well. But I encourage you, I urge you, for your own spiritual health and the health of your family, commit to finding Christian friends who can talk with you about serious things and encourage you and challenge you in your walk with the Lord. And then finally, I promise you finally, regular confession. Regular confession. Here at Transfiguration, we got confession nearly every single day. And I would like to challenge you to go to confession once a month at least. Once a month. Once a year is not enough. It's the bare minimum that the church asks. Once a month. And to enter into that sacrament well. And how do we do that? Not primarily, I would offer, by thinking, oh, what rules did I break? But how have I failed to love? How have I failed to love my spouse, my children, myself? How have I failed to love myself by not eliminating from my life occasions of sin, not challenging myself to live better than I am living now? How have I failed in love? Regular examination of conscience can be an inspiration and certainly provides the grace to continue to grow in the walk with the Lord. Daily prayer, set aside, practically, concretely, when will I pray? Christian friendship, are there people in my life who are striving to take the faith seriously? And have I let them into my life? Regular confession, once a month, I would encourage you, once a month, in which we examine how have we failed to love and striving to begin again to do what we are called to do. All right. Brothers and sisters, at this time we will have exposition of the Blessed Sacrament. Again, Father Lynch is available in the Moses room for confession. I'll be with our kiddos, preparing them for First Communion for a little bit, and then I'll jump in the crying room. At 10:30, we will have benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. Would encourage you, if you can, to stick around for that. It's a very powerful and beautiful blessing. I wish you all a very, very blessed and holy Easter. Celebrate well. Please kneel.
Father Sire, we also have our confirmation meeting in the gathering space. So all those who are here for confirmation, after exposition, will go out for our meeting in the gathering space.